Silicon Grapevine. I'm Nitin Dard, and my guest today is Jack Kang, who's part of the founding team and a senior VP at SiFive. Hello, Jack.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be
Good,
here.
good, good. Well, Jack, just tell us a little bit about your role. And I mean, you've been with SiFive probably about 8 years, and you're part of the founding team. Just tell us what you do and where you are with that journey right now with SiFive.
Yeah, so part of founding team at SiFive, I've probably done pretty much every job at the company, other than detailed engineering. Although I did get involved here and there, some bring up some hardware things in the early days. But these days, I'm responsible for everything related to our customers or commercial activities. So whether that's I'm working with partners on the BD side, sales, the FAE team, the technical support, pre and post sales, customer experience, and also all our global teams that work with the customers. So it's probably easiest because anything to do with a customer or partner at SiFive, I'm working there to help them have a great experience.
Well, I mean, I'm sure most of our audience know who SiFive is, but what's SiFive's sort of key proposition? Maybe just give us a little bit of a summary.
Yeah, I mean, SiFive was we're founded by the inventors of RISC-V. So basically, we are pushing RISC-V technology into the industry, whatever shape that means. Primarily in the form of CPU IP. So we license CPU IP to people who are making chips, whether they're SoC companies or system companies or OEMs these days who are getting involved in the chip business. License RISC-V IP from us, but we actually provide complete RISC-V solutions and grow the entire ecosystem from software stacks, software support, new capabilities these days. As you get to talk about AI platforms, RISC-V has a huge role in AI. So RISC-V is it's a new ecosystem. It's an open standard instruction set. So that's really changed how the industry is approaching things. We can definitely get deeper into that, but SiFive is by far the leader in RISC-V. We're the largest team working on RISC-V. We only work on RISC-V, and we've been doing that since we introduced it to the world 8 years ago.
Now, I suppose you said your role is you're working, interfacing with customers and potential customers. So what kind of feedback are you getting from the market? We're going to your journey a little bit, but just tell us a little bit about the feedback from the market on SiFive, RISC-V, and what's the sort of level of adoption? We hear all kinds of things.
Yeah, no, I think this is kind of where it depends if you're zooming out or zooming in. I think day to day, when you're trying to win customer socket by socket, of course, it's very hard. Right, you have to go in and you got to show value proposition. You have to make it better. People are generally switching from something that they've known for many years into something new. But at the macro level, everybody I talk to, they all be like, yeah, things are all going to move to RISC-V. It's very clear. It's really just a matter of adoption timing, which markets first. We see certain geographies moving extremely aggressively towards RISC-V. We see certain areas of the market, embedded cores and those devices, which are all really moved to RISC-V. And then kind of as it makes its journey into higher performing areas and sockets. So I think if you ask anybody and you say, look, in the future, are all of these things or are many of these things going to be based on RISC-V? They'll all tell you yes. People have different opinions. Some people will say it's 3 years from now. Some people will say it's 5 years from now. Some people will say it's 10 years from now. But nobody denies, that it's not happening or it isn't going to happen. So really, it kind of what's fun every day is like working with the customers, working these markets to see how do we move everything towards it, and being there for the whole journey is quite. If you actually pause, it's quite amazing because 7 years ago, I was literally having to explain to every person I met like what is RISC-V and why do they want it. And these days, if at least you're in the semiconductor industry, like that's not a question anymore. Everybody knows what it is. It's like, okay, like which project should I intersect? Which one? How do I transition over? How quickly do I transition over? Those are the type of discussions that we have nowadays, which is again, day to day, you feel like it's tough, but you zoom out and you're like, yeah, that's a sea change from a few years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very similar to there's a parallel with the late 90s when we were trying to pitch this configurable 32-bit RISC processor, and everybody says, oh, won't it break? And yeah, they really were sort of uncertain about so many things. So it seems to go in waves in the industry in terms of this new sort of technologies and new ways of doing things.
Right, right. Yeah, I think the longer you're in the industry, the more you discover that things sort of repeat
Yeah,
themselves,
yeah,
pattern wise. But I think
yeah.
this is definitely, new ISAs with broad adoptions.
Mm,
Historically, it only happens once every 30 years. So
yeah.
RISC-V
Oh,
at this
well, good.
point, it came in at the right point, right? So yeah.
Right, good. So, all right, you how did you get into electronics? I think you had a sort of family influence with your dad, didn't you? So
Uh,
that's kind of where you had this sort of exposure from when you were very young.
right, right. Yeah. So I grew up in the Bay Area. I was born in Taiwan and raised here. But growing up here, kind of the expectation was always sort of like, yeah, you're gonna get into some engineering or some science or probably some engineering thing, kind of in the you know Chinese Asian household. That was sort of the default
Yes. Yeah.
expectation. And luckily for me, I had a natural interest in it anyway. And kind of the math and science things kind of came relatively easy to me. So, I can't say it was like 100% just by choice because it wasn't like there was a choice, but it also wasn't like a thing that there was any pushback against. And, so my father, he had an electrical engineering background, but actually he would tell me later he was like a terrible student. But he was actually a technology executive, kind of more on the sales and business side after transitioning from the engineering path over.
Mm,
So growing up, at the dinner table and all of our conversations were always around kind of business topics and, business issues and things of
yeah.
that nature. And it was kind of like, just really interesting. And I think, being exposed in that environment, it kind of be like, oh yeah, that's kind of a nice path, kind of do the engineering and then move to the business side, if you will. And there was nothing to ever like kind of counter that. It wasn't like there's anything else. I was like, oh, I'm actually really interested in this other stuff. Maybe we'll go do that, or this is not enjoyable. So it was sort of, I don't know if I'll say it's like a chosen path, but it was kind of
Yeah.
like, well, here's sort of a default path, and then it kind of
Default.
worked out
Yes. Yeah.
along the way. But yeah, it's amazing kind of how much you absorb from those conversations that you don't realize until years later, right? Things that happen, you know, even now, and be like, oh yeah, well, that actually came in handy, right? Things like that
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
don't manifest itself until many years later. So you don't really appreciate it at the time.
So, how did you get your first break? I mean, you went to Berkeley, and then um, what happened next? You got a bit of a lucky break, I guess.
Yeah, well, so let me talk a little bit about Berkeley. So I went to Berkeley in an electrical engineering computer science
Yeah.
program. Just kind of generically when I applied, and while I was there, I was taking a broad spectrum of classes. Berkeley does a fantastic job of having a thing that teaches you everything from the physics in the silicon device to manufacturing to chips, all the way to highest levels of software
Mm,
abstraction, that entire stack, and you could take
mm,
whatever you want within that. And I was taking a lot of courses, not knowing where I was going to focus on. And there was one summer, I think it's like maybe my junior year or something, where I was like, I need to find a summer internship or do something during the summer to maybe get a job or an unpaid job and learn a few things, in case I need to, this kind of both our experience, and if I wanted to go to grad school, it wasn't clear. Um, so, while I was looking and trying to figure out, what to do, what I could get, I got an email out of the blue from Professor David Patterson. Was a very famous computer
yeah.
architecture
Yeah.
professor. He's somebody that I didn't even consider asking, because I was like, "There's no, I'm not even gonna ask." That was like too high of a level in terms of what I get. But I got this email out of the blue from him saying, "Hey, I need help to revamp my computer architecture course. Would you like to do this with me over the summer?" And inside, I'm shouting yes. And then the kicker came. It's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I could also pay you." I was like, "Yeah, I would have done
Wow.
this for like free, like easily for
Yeah.
free." Um, I guess I had done quite well in in an earlier class, and the professor had recommended me
Yeah.
silently
Okay.
to him. But that then kind of, in a way, really shaped the future. So first, developed a great relationship with Dave. Helped me with that computer architecture class. TA'd it. At Berkeley is also one of those, like, the coursework, they kind of just throw you out and it's like, oh, you figure this out. You're kind of on your own, very
Yeah.
much.
Mm.
That's kind of the Berkeley style. So in a way, kind of that was how the coursework was done. I helped a lot of students. So then they really got me into computer architecture and CPU design and digital design, kind of in a way that sort of solidified that as like the focus area while I was at school. And many years later, it turns out the SiFive is computer architecture.
So, I mean, what he asked you to do, did you manage to fulfill whatever was needed? You,
Yeah, so that was the first time they were so in computer architecture class at Berkeley, they actually have you build a CPU. And when I took class, that was the first semester where they actually not only had you build it, but how you implement it into an FPGA. Um,
okay.
so nobody had any idea how to do that. Like they don't teach you these things. They're like, well, here's those lighting tools and here's a board. Like, have at it. And you're like,
Yeah.
you don't know. It took like months to figure out, like, oh, there's this constraint file thing that I need to do. like they
Okay.
literally don't tell you anything. So, um, a lot of things I did was like kind of actually helping students, like helping write down the coursework and making it a little bit more structured on this is how you're supposed to do this. But then you got really hands on in, how FPGAs work, the design flow, and we use commercial tools at Berkeley, right? So we, simplicity, I think back then,
Yeah. Yeah.
iLeaks Project Navigator, we had, the boards and so like that, um, ended up being a lot of practical real world learnings. The FPGA skills learned there, while making the course happen, while developing that. I mean, that was, I would argue, I had better FPGA skills than most engineers, with many years of experience, later on in industry,
Yeah. Yeah.
just because there's a thing where you actually had to learn it yourself and like figure it out and spend countless midnight hours that I guess you can do when you're young in college, that gets you that learning. So I think both just from a discovering that computer architecture kind of clicked in my brain and was interesting, but then the practical base.
Was that a precursor to RISC-V that you were working on, or? Yeah.
Um, I can't say that it was. I mean, the classwork back then was still based on MIPS.
Okay.
Which
Oh
I came
yes.
kind of a
Yeah.
few years later as a research project at UC Berkeley. But eventually when I was discussing with the RISC-V inventors and about SiFive, this kind of came full circle. And it also made kind of like made a lot of things make sense for everybody.
Okay. So, I mean, after you did that, so then what was your next break? What happened next?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I was actually working for a small IP company, kind of back in the young and idealistic, and you're like, oh yeah, small companies, kind of startup, big chance, gonna make it big. I kind of discovered quickly that there's actually different kinds of companies. Not all small companies want to make it big. There's actually a
Yeah.
very good career, very good living if you keep your company a certain size and you do a certain amount of things, and it's a
Yeah.
really good um, lifestyle. And that kind of opened my eyes. Um, so I was really bored in that job. I was an engineer, but it was a very small company, so there was not very many colleagues to talk to, very few customers to talk to. So just sitting in a room and just working on stuff was really not for me. I think it's also good to learn that about yourself. So I
Yes.
spent a couple of years there, and then I actually ended up going to Marvell, where I was actually part of their CPU team. So
How did you get
Marvell,
into Marvell? How did you get? I mean, was that like a job
I
advert
had
or?
a friend that I had graduated Berkeley with, and she
Okay.
was at Marvell, and she just referred me in.
Okay.
Uh, so it was kind of just by luck, frankly.
Good. Yeah.
And it wasn't like they targeted the CPU design team position. It was sort of just a generic design
Right.
role, but it ended up in the CPU team, which was really nice with my background. And then back then, Marvell had an ARM architecture license, and they were one of the few companies in the world with an ARM architecture license. So I was actually designing ARM-based CPUs,
Mm.
um, and this was before they acquired the Intel Xscale group, which was one of the other few companies at the time that had an ARM architecture license. So once they acquired it, they ended up combining the two groups, doing ARM-based design. And ironically, then, as a designer of the CPU, what happened was the different SoC teams in Marvell were using the internally designed CPUs, which then in the market, the customers would ask, like, why are you using those CPUs and not the standard off-the-shelf CPUs from ARM? So they needed somebody to go explain like the benefits of the internal CPU versus ARM. So even though they were ARM-based CPUs,
Yeah.
end up having to explain to people why it was better than ARM. It's kind of selling against ARM, even from those days. And so I was in the CPU team, and they needed somebody to go to these different business units. Like, well, somebody needs to go explain the CPUs. So that kind of became me. And then what happened is that the different groups talk to the other groups. So like you're in the storage group, and then like the comms groups is like, hey, I need somebody to go talk about CPU. Who's the best guy to go do that? And the guy, well, Jack came with us last time, so go get Jack, right? So pretty soon, all the different groups were just asking me to go with them, and that kind of became like the full-time role, and that really started kind of the transition from engineer, and doing
Marketing.
engineering work into kind of, it was like kind of a technical marketing.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned earlier, that was always sort of the default path. I was like, well, do engineering for a certain amount of time, and then move into kind of more the business sales customer aspect. But there was never a set time, like how long before doing that. So it was kind of faster than I probably would have planned, but it just sort of worked out. Started doing that full time, and eventually moved into the business units. But yeah, I think it's funny. It was like start selling it from back then.
But I mean, there's one or two big achievements, but also a lot of learnings from your 7 years at Marvell, I guess.
Yeah. So I was going to say, kind of the big break, if you will, kind of after that was what ended up being the Microsoft Kinect project. So Microsoft came to Marvell, and they wanted a custom chip for this kind of new idea that they had. Right? Remember,
and you weren't supposed to be there, but I think you ended up being on the team.
I obviously, because I was an engineer, I just moved over. I was very junior, right? So if you look at like the totem pole ranking, I was probably like 4th or 5th on the totem pole in terms of like who should have got this project. But the day they came. So first they were very secretive, so nobody knew what the project was. If they knew, they never would have given it to me because it was too big to give to me. So first they were secretive, and then one guy was traveling, and one guy was on vacation, and somebody else was tied up or something. So I remember Whaley, co-founder Marvell. Okay, well, Jack, come up and explain this stuff to them, and it's just about seizing your opportunity. Kind of I just took it and ran with it, and never let it go. And this a year and a half later, then it's very successful. Not only did we win the design, right, which is a thing of itself, you get to go through the customer journey to win the design, both with the customer and also kind of internally too, right? You got to convince the internal teams that this is a project worth doing, and then the project, of course, managing it to success. It was the fastest ramping consumer product of all time. So, there's like ramping issues and how you ramp silicons, kind of that entire flow kind of just never let it go. And then, like I said, like you said, it never should have been my opportunity to do. But if you get it and then you do it and you do a great job, everybody's like, oh, well, then he can do more things and he can do more stuff. Right. And then you get, kind of the juicier opportunities, if you will, or just be, in the room for more interesting things or exciting things that come up. So, I think luck does play a big role, right? But everybody will get. You don't know. You can't control your luck. But when the opportunity comes and the time comes and you have those, are you ready to take it? And will you take it? A lot of people, I think, probably would have. Maybe they would have bowed out. They would be like, "Oh, this is a big project, and I don't know if I could do it. Maybe we need some help. Bring somebody else in." But having that confidence, like, yeah, I could do this, and just being able to go and do that, I think so. That was kind of like a, from a career standpoint, a huge accelerant.
So I mean, from an impact point of view, I mean, that was quite a big project and a big earner as well, I guess.
Right. No, definitely, it was a big project. Big earner for Marvell. $100 million type project, but it's more than that. It's the amount of credibility that you get with your peers, with others in the company. People look at you differently. if your future project comes in and you're like, hey guys, we should do this, like the credibility was just completely different. And then
And
that allows you
also because you were always the youngest person in the room, you said. So I guess,
right.
it gives you a little bit more of a ranking than even if you're the youngest.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, I think definitely that. And I think it also gives you more confidence too. Like, yeah, you can do this, right? Like you don't need to defer just because maybe you're less experienced than others. But yeah, no, I think it's great because after that, then like I said, then you're invited to more things, you're involved in more stuff.
Mm.
So up until the last few years, this is kind of carried over, and I've always been the youngest person in the room. So now I'm getting older, so now I can't quite claim that
Yeah,
anymore. But that definitely was
yeah.
many years.
You did once get a award, didn't you, for 40 something 40 under 40 or something?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that was quite nice. I think the PR team at Marvell kind of helped facilitate that, but I think that was just kind of nice recognition for myself. Again,
mm.
to me, it built up the confidence. Like, yeah, you can do this, and this actually is meaningful, right? And uh, you know, you can go farther, keep pushing.
So, I mean, from there you went to Nvidia. I mean, you're doing so well at Marvell. What prompted you to then go to Nvidia? There was a great opportunity, or somebody said, "Come and help us with something," or what?
Um, no, yeah, I think so. Marvell was a fantastic place. Very great learning experience. I would say the formative years of my career were spent at Marvell, and I was working directly for Whaley. And I think folks in the Valley have you know a wide range of opinions on Whaley, but I would say, and kind of what I learned from her, she was like fantastic with customers, and she really understood you know how to treat customers, how to put them first, and do whatever it takes to
Mm,
really help the customer succeed. And I think that was a great lesson that carried forward. So kind of at Marvell, after time things had run its course, and there's a lot of changes at Marvell, and it was also sort of for myself, um, you know what kind of I was already working for Marvell or Whaley at that time. So kind of what would it be like, opportunities to do more things.
mm,
um so I ended up going to Nvidia, and I was part of the Tegra group there, doing
mm,
new business development. And this was what I call the dying days of mobile, where I think Nvidia was still sort of trying to go into the mobile space. So that was kind of the initial things that I'd worked on, but they would shortly kind of stop going after that market. Nvidia is very good at understanding what markets are they good at, like where do they have value, and then they will charge the customer for that. Like Jensen's really good at that, right? That's kind of my high level takeaway from Nvidia. And mobile at that point, ultimately it was like, that's not where they can get huge value. Um, so uh, so then they kind of had to pivot to where can Tegra go, and that was kind of also like pre AI. So they were starting to do AI platforms and things. But I found the Nintendo opportunity, so I ended up basically the one driving the activity with Nintendo, the entire design win of the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, there was a huge team behind it, but kind of from a customer standpoint, and hey, this is actually a real opportunity, bring it in, doing those things, because Nvidia was in a way, they had never successfully sold to Nintendo before. So the Nintendo Switch was the first time that Mario was rendered on an Nvidia GPU legally. Let's say
right.
there's plenty of
Okay.
emulators that did it, but from a legal standpoint, so the Nintendo Switch, that was a huge design, right? That was a multi-billion-dollar
Yeah.
design win. Obviously, very successful commercial product. A lot of that was the joint efforts of the Nintendo team and the Nvidia team that kind of shepherded through. But that was like a really big deal, right? So that was kind of what I spent most time at Nvidia working on. So no, fantastic experience.
I mean, I think with the different sort of approaches and culture between what you saw at Marvell and what you saw at Nvidia, and I mean, did you feel like you learned something new, something different?
Yeah. No, I would say the two companies are kind of at different ends of the spectrum in terms of
Mm,
how they view themselves, the products, and the customers. Where I would say, Marvell had good technology, but it wasn't always like the best There was always some issues, but whatever the issues were, at Marvell, we were like an army of ants. Like you couldn't stop us. Whatever barriers you put in the way, we would just go around it, over it, under it, and we would take the products and we would wrap it up and shine it and package it and put a bow on it and do whatever it took to get the customer to take it, to use it. And that's sort of like the Marvell way, right? The customer focus. How do we figure that out for them? Where if I contrast that with Nvidia, extremely well run company. The products are fantastic. The highest end. Brings the most value, but they also know they bring the most value, right? So if the customer is not willing to endure pain, and pain comes in many forms, endure pain to use that, then they don't value the product enough. It's kind of how I put it, right? So they're very like, no, the customer's going to endure pain because this is so valuable, and then we're going to collect that value from them.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with either one, but I think it was fantastic kind of just seeing the contrast between the two and kind of learning the approach to products and customers.
Okay. And so what was the trigger for you to then sort of go and join the founding team at SiFive? And I guess you've done so well at Marvell, you've done so well at Nvidia. Nvidia, I think, was in a couple of years, but what happened?
Yeah, I think there's really two things that happened. So the first was I always had this belief, kind of after working at Marvell, working at Nvidia, that hardware was too close-minded. I mean, I remember we had customers who'd come in and say, "I just want to use the chip as is," and the first thing we had to ask was like, "Well, what's your volume? What are you doing?" Because we knew that in order for them to be successful, we'd have to support them in their production flow. I was like, "Well, why do we have to support it?" Like, well, because we deliver things as binary blobs, and there's things that are just hidden, like hidden registers, and we don't document all this stuff. I was like, why not? It's like, well, because if they knew the register map in our, $100 million SoC, then they can steal our secrets and reproduce it. It's like, does this really make sense, right? If you look at the software world, kind of what they've done with, open source software and just being more open, it grew like a much larger ecosystem. So there's always this part of me that just truly believed that, hardware needed to become more open and it was going to open more doors. So that's kind of lingering in the background, but it was kind of like a chicken and egg. Like, how do you do something that's more open that people care about? Because nobody cares about it, then there's no point that it's open. So kind of the RISC-V story, when it came around, I was like, it really resonated. It's like, well, this is how it's going to happen. This is a thing that is an open standard. There's open source components to it that now is kind of commonly confused. We can talk about that later. But this open standard, this openness, is going to create all new hardware designs, all new hardware capabilities. So I believe that innately from a product and hardware ecosystem need. So then when RISC-V came, I was like, this is the solution that's going to break the chicken and egg. So that's the technology and market portion. The second portion is obviously, you're doing great at Nvidia. Why would you leave? And Nvidia was great. It was a very well run company, and we talked about
you could have been a billionaire by now,
and you never know what's the right choice. We still don't know. But and I was getting very well compensated, and like I mentioned, we left mobile. We had the Nintendo design, which was huge, and then people were figuring out like what's next. So there's a lot of different things, and of course I was in those meetings, but other folks were trying to not like they were working on stuff, right? There's like stuff that they were working on, and it's kind of like, well, Jack, you can sort of do whatever you want. You keep Nintendo happy, then it's all good, right? So now I was in charge of Japan. So if I was like 5 years from retirement, it would have been like fantastic, because it was really not, it wasn't that much work. Just to be honest, right?
Okay.
It was relatively simple, right? It was you do the stuff, and but I was too young to like retire. I'd be like, I need to do more things. And again, it wasn't like there weren't opportunities at Nvidia to do more things. It was just like, everybody sort of like fighting. That sounds bad. I don't want to make it sound bad. It's just like, look, people, they're exploring different markets and they're trying different things and doing all that stuff. And in a way, hey, Jack, you already sort of have your thing, right? You got the Nintendo thing. They got the Gen 2. There's stuff there for you. Well, when a company like, that's worth a lot of money to Nvidia. So yeah, you can just keep working on that. So so then, so when RISC-V came and, SiFive, and, heard the story, figured out what was going on. And, it was founded by, David Rosveda at UC Berkeley. Dave Patterson was part of the inventor, and they wanted to commercialize this. And I remember the first conversation I had with them, and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm really not trying to be arrogant here or anything, but based on what you described, like, you're not going to find a better person for the job than me. Just in terms of, okay, you want somebody with CPU design, backgrounds. I know CPUs, studied that at Berkeley, did it at Marvell, have sold IP and chips. They didn't know, SiFive didn't exactly know how they wanted to go to market at that time, and have achieved, significant commercial success, right? With the Kinect, the Marvell, Switch, other things that I had done. But at the same time, still of a relative age, kind of same as the inventors of RISC-V founders could get along, plus connected back to the UC Berkeley connection, Dave Patterson. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work out. I know I want it, but on paper, like, you cannot draw up anything better. Like, the guy was like, agreed, like, it just, sometimes these things just happen.
So who was in the interview? I mean, was it Kirsten or?
So I remember, the interview I went, it was Krista, Yansup, and Andrew, because, so the three inventors and co-founders of SiFive.
Yep.
And then I went in there and I was like, okay, before you guys tell me anything, I want to tell you what I think SiFive should be doing and what RISC-V should be doing, and let's see if we agree. Because I don't want it to be like influenced by you. This is what I think should happen. And then I kind of described it, and then they were like, "Yep, that's exactly what we're thinking." So then, we had a very long dinner, and we talked about it. We had a very long dinner, and then I remember Yansup, who's kind of the most dynamic of the three, if you will. So we had a very nice dinner, and then I actually then mailed them. I mailed them a letter. It wasn't really a letter. In the letter was a expense report receipt. It was actually a dinner receipt that I had after we closed the Nintendo deal. This is a whole other story which we don't have time into. But anyway, the bill for that dinner was like $32,000.
Oh, okay.
They actually had to change the expense policy because of me a little bit. But anyway, $32,000. But it was all fine. It was all approved. It was all good. But I mailed them a copy of the receipt, and I was like, let's build this up to where we have this dinner also. Kind of what I sent them.
So that incentivized them really, and said, okay, well, yeah, we need to hire this guy.
Yeah. That was basically it. So yeah, so we're not quite there yet. We haven't had the $32,000 dinner. I guess with inflation now, it's going to be a $64,000 dinner, but we'll get there.
Okay.
So that was sort of I think it's just kind of, I think that speaks to, like, sometimes the right technical fit, people fit, everything else, and then now look at where we are now.
What would you say is, I mean, through this, the things you've done, what are the biggest learnings or that you've sort of had through your career, and what do you feel really proud of?
Yeah, I think I would just tell people, you have to have confidence in what you're doing, and that confidence shouldn't come from a place of like misplaced confidence. Like, you need to put in the work and understand the technology, understand what you're good at, understand, where you should ask for help and those things. If you do that, then you're going to have confidence in what you do. So then when the opportunity comes, which is completely luck, right? I think it's completely luck. Like, when the right opportunity comes, like the Microsoft thing, but everybody's going to get those chances. You just don't know when it's going to be, and you might not even recognize it. So it's like, will you be ready to recognize it? And then will you seize that opportunity? Right. So I think having that kind of confidence to do that, and then when the opportunity comes, to just take it and run, and just execute on it. And then that creates more opportunities for you down the line. So I think that's kind of like the biggest lesson I would say is you need to have that confidence, and it doesn't come for free. You got to work really hard to have that, so that then when the opportunity comes, be able to recognize when you need to put in that extra effort.
Sure.
Really drive that one.
What are you most proud of your sort of achievements over what you've done? I mean, you've mentioned some really great projects, but There must be
Yeah,
one sort of
I,
like,
well,
or is
I
it,
think
or is it the $32,000 dinner bill?
$32,000 was one. That represents a lot of things, right? When you can actually you get it done, and you screw up the expense report policy, and nobody actually really questions it. They're like, yeah, that all makes sense. That's a
Yeah.
nice feeling. But I would say it's not complete. I think it's really what's happening with RISC-V, because
Mm,
this is something where we you know I we had to introduce a completely brand new concept to the world. 8 years
mm,
ago, we had to every meeting I had was like, what is RISC-V? I had to explain it. What's an ISO? Well, and the more people knew about stuff, the more they're like, that's not great. And you look at where we are now, and we're still in the early parts of the journey. So I think I'm looking forward a few years when everything is almost everything is switched over to RISC-V, and I think people all believe in that. I think they're just trying to figure out, is it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years from now? But when that's complete, and it's certainly going to happen, I think that'll be most proud, because that one, it's not just one project. It's not one big project, right? It's not just $100 million project like the Kinect, or $1 billion project like the Switch, but this is like you've transformed the entire industry with something that's completely new and changes how they approach it. And SiFive, I'm certain will be a big part of that, but it's even larger than SiFive, right? Because the whole concept of RISC-V is not just a single company does it, but this entire ecosystem, including our competitors, including our customers.
yeah.
So but it's going to happen. It's kind of inevitable. So I think I maybe restricting out a little bit, but I think that clearly is just on a different scale, because
Okay.
now you transform industry.
Now, that's from a technology point of view, but what excites you about what's going on in the world right now?
So, I think what excites is really that, for an industry, like, it never stops. A few years ago, I would have told you that, I think we have a big problem with our foundry technologies. You get to like 3 micron, sorry, 3 nanometers, 2 nanometers. Like, it's so expensive. Like, who's gonna be able to afford to do this? Will people keep doing it? What's gonna
Mm,
happen? And boom, AI shows up, right? So I think it's just one of those, like, look, no matter what happens, there's always gonna be more here. So I think that really excites me, that it doesn't stop. So that there is, opportunity to keep going. A lot of these things that we thought were kind of fantasy or science fiction is becoming more and more true. Um, so I'm really excited to kind of see where all this technology takes us.
mm,
I think that not just as a consumer getting to experience that, but that kind of knowing that, hey, this industry and this technology is not going to stop. There's always going to be something. It's always going to push. And the fact that things always change, right? I think this is the other thing that people, I think, lose sight of, like, in a very short time period, where you think like, well, this company is unbeatable, or this market is unassailable. It's like, that's not true. I mean, if you go back 10, 15 years, like, companies go up and down, they change all the
yeah,
time, right?
they
Things
did.
like, BlackBerry was king of mobile at one time. Motorola was king of mobile. Who thought those would change, right? I think company like Intel with their struggles, I don't count them out by any means, but if you told somebody 10 years ago, like, Intel's going to be having trouble, like, nobody would have believed you. So these
Exactly.
things just it's ever changing, right? So if you're in the middle of it and you're able to be involved, I think it's fantastic, you know, area to be in, just professionally, and it just satisfies you to be able to do new things. Because I think going back to my original building IP in a room and not talking to anybody, like, that stuff, like, I just cannot handle. Like, I have to be out, things moving, talking to people, things changing. That's kind of what excites me. So I think that the fact that the industry is going to do that, and clearly going to continue to do that, is really quite exciting for myself.
Okay. And I mean, finally, I think you've answered it already in terms of having confidence. But what would you advise young Jack, knowing what you know now?
um Yeah, I mean, I think when opportunity comes, make sure you take it. I think,
Okay.
don't be afraid
All right.
to ask for help. I think mentors are really important. You should have multiples of them. You'll learn different things from them, good, bad. Learn from the mistakes. Be in the room, observe the other folks. Take everything as a learning opportunity. I think that would be professionally. And then I think the other stuff was, if I find a way to get more sleep, keep your body in shape. That I think that's still important. It only gets harder.
Okay.
To address.
Well, good. Jack, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Nitin.